Welcome to Draw This. In this episode, we're going to draw incense and smoke. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll be using Corel Painter 2015 today. I'm starting with a dark canvas. I just added a little bit of color to the background with an airbrush. And then I've gone ahead and created several layers for our incense. There's incense in the foreground, and there'll be incense in the background that'll be out of focus, and we'll keep those separate. I'm going to select the scratchboard tool and turn on straight line painting mode. The shortcut for straight line drawing is V, and freeform drawing is B on your keyboard. You'll have to switch between B and V to break the line segment, or it'll just keep going. I'm going to switch to the bulge brush and just round off these corners, and then I'll also paint along the incense just to make the edges a little wobbly. I'll turn on preserve transparency and just fill all those layers with that same color to cover up any potential white fringe. Then I'll create some new layers for ash and paint in some ash with that same scratchboard tool. Then I'll use the airbrush to add some three-dimensional shading. I'm going to shade these like they're long cylinders. So I'm going to have the light on one side and a shadow on the other. I'm going to select a red color and I'm going to go ahead and put in an area for some of the embers. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a layer for embers, and this will be a screen composite method. I'll use the glow brush to make it glow and look like it's on fire. And then I'll go ahead and add some texture over these incense layers on separate layers. What I'm doing is I'm using select layer content to create a selection of the incense and then creating a new layer and painting over it. Now at this point I don't need to keep my layers separate anymore, so I'm going to merge all of the incense foreground layers and all of the incense background layers. Then I'm going to blur the background incense with effects focus soften and reduce the opacity a little. Then I'm going to start adding more detail to the foreground incense, since you'll be able to see that better. I'm going to add some smoke to the incense next by selecting a particle brush that is called Spring Chain Smoky. This works really good for smoke. Make sure you don't have a selection active by deselecting your selection, and then go ahead and paint in some smoke. These little particles follow your brush and they create these little smoke trails. So depending on what your brush is sized to, you'll get different results. I'm going to go ahead and just blur that background smoke a little bit, and also use the diffuse blur just to blend away anything I don't like. And I'll blur the foreground smoke a little bit as well, but I want it to be less blurry. Then I'm going to turn on preserve transparency and tint the smoke blue. Then I'm going to erase anywhere where I overpainted with the smoke. Next I'll add a vignette on a new layer set to multiply. I'll go ahead and darken the edges and then reduce the opacity of that layer. Let's also add some tinting on a new layer. That'll be a multiply composite method as well, and we'll just tint it kind of orange and back down the opacity. Next I'm going to drop all copy and paste to create a duplicate, and then I'll hide that duplicate and I'll blur the background layer. Then I'll reveal the topmost layer, create a mask, fill that mask with black, and then mask away some of that blurriness to create a nice focal effect. I'm also going to add a little bit of cool reflected color on the far side of the incense. Then I'm going to drop all layers again, duplicate that layer again, and then I'm going to use equalize this time, just to kind of balance out the light and the dark values. And then sometimes when I get near the end of the piece, I like to flip it horizontally, and sometimes it looks better and I leave it that way. I'm going to add some overlay layers just to change the color up a little bit. I'm going to select kind of a purplish blue color and fill the canvas with that. And then I'll go ahead and add a mask to that layer, and I'll use the airbrush to go ahead and mask out some of that color. So anywhere I paint with black, it's going to conceal that area of the layer, and now part of the image is tinted and the other part isn't. I'm going to add another layer with orange and do that again, and just go ahead and mask out some of the area that I don't want to be orange. Now there's a nice transition from orange to that purplish color. And I'll play with the layer opacity just to find a nice blend. I'm going to drop all layers again and use the diffuse blur to blend this ash a little bit, and then add in a little more detail with the detail oils, just so the texture looks different on the ash compared to the rest of the incense. I'll just keep adding a little more detail, and then I'm going to select the image hose brush that is called Relief Blobs, and the linear size P angle D brush. This brush creates little three-dimensional blobs, which helps it look more like an incense texture. And then I'll use the blur blender just to kind of blur some of that up, make it not so sharp. And we have a finished painting of some incense sticks with smoke. If you enjoyed this episode of Draw This, I hope you'll join me every Tuesday for a new episode. Click that subscribe button if you're new to my channel, and you'll get updates when I release new videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.